again, welcome. This is Word of Info, and today we have with us His Excellency Ambassador Paul Garnier, Ambassador of Switzerland in Egypt, Dr. Amrou Mabrouk, Professor of Plastic Surgery at Ain Shams University, Dua Mohammed at the controls, I'm Najla Naguib, and we're with you until 5 o'clock, so stay with us. This is Word of Info. Hello everyone, you're welcome. This is Word of Info.
So it's a very special day and afternoon to have with ourselves here in our studio Mr. Paul Garnier, the ambassador of Switzerland in Cairo, a man who has great faculties serving his country as a professional diplomat in Guatemala, Belgium, Geneva, Bern, and acting as an ambassador in Palestine, and now the currently ambassador in Egypt, with a graduate of the International and Development Study Institute of International and Development Studies. But yet also he didn't only serve in diplomacy, but before he went to diplomacy he served as well in the ICRC with exposure in Peru and Sri Lanka. Right? And of course this is a very vivid career. Sir, thank you very much for taking the time to come to our program. It's a great honor and a great pleasure.
Well, Mr. Mabrouk, Najla, thank you very much for having me here.
It's a great pleasure and honor. Representing a country like Switzerland, a country that has been a role model to the whole world for the high per capita income and the type of life that these Swiss people are living, and the sort of democracy the country has been living all through the years, which is of course has been hard earned, because the old Swiss confederations date till maybe 1291, but 1815 marks the recognition of Swiss neutrality, and 1848 marks the constitution. How was it possible, amid all the turmoil in Europe, for Switzerland to be a peaceful haven in the 19th century, knowing of course that there was an invasion by Napoleon Bonaparte, should we call it invasion, of course, 1798 and onwards, and complete demolition of the state, and the gentleman Napoleon Bonaparte said that almost Switzerland has been abolished as a confederation and was put under the auspice of the French Empire. And yet there was a resurrection, and 1815 marks this resurrection. How was it possible in such turmoil and century full of turmoils that Switzerland comes out victorious with this change of into democracy and change into a strong confederation?
Well, this is indeed a topic that shows that Switzerland was chosen in 1815 as a neutral country by the different powers in Europe. It was not necessarily a choice of Switzerland itself. It was a recognition by the different powers in Europe. But and I would say it's not necessarily marked in the genes of the Swiss that they have to be neutral, and so that's something that came along. What is, and the Swiss people from the Helvetia to the Swiss Confederation had also fought some battles in history, but I would actually go back a little more than 1815. I would go back to 300 years before, to the Battle of Marignan in 1515, when the Swiss Confederates actually lost the battle against at that time François Ier and Francis I, and then there was a perpetual peace that was signed in 1516 with France, and that lasted actually until the Napoleon times. And so in 1815 the big powers decided that it was a good idea to have Switzerland as a neutral country. It continued during the 19th century, also because I think basically for Switzerland neutrality is a must because of our different cultures that are building our country. And you cannot imagine how difficult it would be to deal with all these cultures if every side was going to take side whenever there is a conflict.
And this happened in 1839 with the Zurich Putsch, and it happened with what you call in history a civil war, because it was a civil war, but thank God it was a very short-lived one with minimal casualty of only 100 people who died due to friendly fire, most of them, in 1847. So this was a strong wake-up call for the Swiss to bring it up together.
And the modern state of Switzerland actually doesn't come from 1815. It comes from 1848. You're right. And in 1847 we had the internal war, let's say, of Switzerland at that time. And that's a very defining moment for Switzerland. But it was a religious conflict, clearly a religious conflict, not between the different cultural groups in Switzerland. Exactly, between Catholics and Protestants. And in the end, the Protestants won. And the Catholic cantons had to accept the defeat. Fortunately, we didn't have too many casualties, about 100 casualties. And what was interesting is the Protestants were probably more progressive at that time. And I think it didn't go from one day to another that problems were solved between the two different religions. It took at least until the 1870s to really solve the different problems. But I think the Protestant cantons made everything as to try to include the Catholic cantons that didn't, that were a bit afraid of this modern state, of this new state that was pushed forward mainly by urban cantons. Because here we had a difference between the Catholics being more in the rural areas of Switzerland, while the Protestants were more in the urban areas.
I mean, this is they always say in political science books that the constitution of Switzerland is very unique. And the nice thing about it is that you are always, up till now, continuing to do some amendments through referendums and things like that. And of course, we have to get back to it. But we're talking mainly about neutrality of Switzerland, which was very well kept in a very impressive status in 2 world wars. I think this was quite difficult to survive the First World War and the Second World War without being caught up in fighting or in action.
Yes.
How could this have happened? I mean, it's not just good luck. I believe it had a lot of political balances, right?
Sure. You have to see that Switzerland is a country that where different cantons, different small states decided to come together. And so it was not, the neutrality, as I was saying, was something that was very useful for the big powers. But for Switzerland, the fact that these different parts of Switzerland with different cultures decided to come together is a clear sign that they want to stay together. And so everything that could put that into danger is something that the Swiss people are very wary. And what happens? You have in 1914, you have the big powers. You have Germany, France,
the European war.
At war. And what do we have in Switzerland? We have a German-speaking community, a French-speaking community, an Italian-speaking community, and then a very small Romansh-speaking community. So what happens? I mean, if you take side, that means we are going to be fighting among ourselves because the French and the Germans were not on the same side in the war, and so that's clearly. The leadership had to also, keep the population relatively calm, so that we don't get involved into that conflict, so that we don't have consequences for our own unity. So basically, that's the same that happened in the Second World War, and I think it's an existential issue. I mean, it's really an existential issue. Switzerland would have the risk of being torn apart in this kind of big powers conflict that took place in Europe because of the different cultural communities that we have in Switzerland.
In World War II, things were much more difficult because at the time, especially after 1940, Switzerland has been completely surrounded by the Axis except for the Liechtenstein small borders. And of course, this was very, very tough days. There were sort of as if like a trapeze player. The Swiss politicians were trying to keep calm both warring parties and trying to show that they are not going with the Axis or going with the Allies. Otherwise, the Hitler plan for invasion of Switzerland, which was put on plans and in blueprints even after the war, these plans were found, had to be put on ground, but luckily enough it wasn't, because they were involved in more theaters. I mean, so this was difficult times, and even sometimes people were claiming that the bombing that happened to certain cities, quote unquote, by mistake, was sometimes intended to tame the cooperation between Switzerland and the Axis, if it ever was that. And the court-martial has ruled with the side of the Swiss after World War II, and a lot of compensations was made by the American government for the people who were bombed and the cities that were bombed by mistakes. So these were definitely more difficult times than World War I. Don't you think so, sir?
Yes, in World War I we had probably a very dangerous moment when I would say some of our ministers wanted to take side, which was a very difficult moment. I think in the Second World War, it was the threat was so huge, so immense around Switzerland that it was maybe a little easier for the people to decide that they didn't want to participate to the conflict. But it is then a very, very delicate balance to strike, of course, because you have you also have as any country you have values. You are also observing what's going on. You might want to take sides because of what's going on. So it was a very, very delicate balance to draw. But I think it's always between this maybe attraction to one side or another. Here you really have the cohesion issue that is in the end the most important people. But that also means that it was not possible for Switzerland to do anything. You had to be extremely careful with the different warring parties, and you could do things. You had some humanitarian gestures that were done and that we looked at.
And of course, the role of the ICRC was.
And the role of the ICRC, but again, I mean, even for the ICRC, if you want to be able to remain a neutral country in the middle of Europe, which actually was useful for all parties involved, we have to say it. But that's the same thing with the ICRC. The ICRC has to be extremely cautious if it wants to be able to deal with all the parties.
Reports,
exactly, it cannot publicly denounce any side, and it has to do its work very discreetly. Otherwise, it wouldn't work. So this is, of course, afterwards you can always say, okay, we should have done more to save these people who were trying to come or in Switzerland, so on and so on and so on. But you have to see again the situation where it was a very delicate balance that happened, and I think Switzerland in the end managed to remain neutral, which was useful for everyone.
Of course. So this gives us an important question before going for a break, sir. Is that the direct democracy? Because this remains one of the pillars of maintaining the confederation. Could you please elaborate on that? I mean, there is by chance or by law, by constitution, 50,000 people, Swiss, can really present their suggestion for a referendum against any law or against a law that was passed by the parliament. So tell us about this thing. So this direct democracy really helps in maintaining and acting as a cohesive role in the unity of the country.
Yes, the popular rights are certainly a factor of cohesion, because you have, first of all, in Switzerland there is a long tradition of proximity to your authorities, of the possibility to have your say in the decision making. And of course, these rights give the possibility to the people to know that they will not be oppressed by a majority, or at least they will have always the possibility to bring up an issue in front of the whole country. It's interesting also that the factor of cohesion, again, you have different minorities. You have the minorities, religious minorities, you have language speaking minorities, you have urban and rural areas. How do you make sure that everybody doesn't feel that he will be completely excluded, and the system in Switzerland makes it possible that with the possibility of the people to go to a vote, whatever happens, that means also that the government has actually to find consensual solutions so that it doesn't go to a vote. Because in case the decision that is taken by the government is not liked by the people, then you will go very, very, very rapidly to a vote, and then the people can just turn down the decision that was just taken by the government and by the parliament. So that makes also that is the reason why we have actually a consensual government, which is constituted from the four main parties of Switzerland. Yes. And this is, and people don't maybe realize all the time, this is directly linked to the fact that you have the referendum.
Yes. You have 7, the State Council is 7, with representatives of the four main parties for a very long time, even since 1959 almost, right, sir? The number of representatives in the ruling council or the presidential council. So I think we'll take a break after that, and to get to more about politics and progress in Switzerland.
Okay, so back again, word of info, and you can call us at 257-89407. Today we have His Excellency Ambassador Paul Garnier, Ambassador of Switzerland in Egypt, Dr. Amr Mabrouk, Professor Plastic Surgery at Ain Shams University. So back again, word of info, and with us His Excellency Ambassador Paul Garnier, Ambassador of Switzerland in Egypt, and Dr. Amr Mabrouk, Professor Plastic Surgery at Ain Shams University.
So the golden question is always, what is the secret of success of the economy of Switzerland? I mean, a country that has almost no natural resources, and a country that most of its premises are mountains, and there is not a lot of places to live in, and people are living in plateau, which is ecologically very fragile. And yet the country has succeeded with a great perfection. So it all depends on the people of Switzerland. So this is the secret of success, but how? Tell us about that secret, please, if you can. If we may ask you this question.
Yeah, well, I think one thing I want to say is that I think we are also very lucky. We are also very lucky. We are, at the crossroads of the trade routes between, once again, the big Germany, France, Italy, Austria, Eastern Europe. And this strategic position, of course, is of importance. Switzerland was not always a rich country. It was actually a quite poor country until the beginning of the 20th century. It was an emigration country. We because of the lack of natural resources and because of the relatively harsh conditions of the life in the mountains in Switzerland, many people were actually emigrating to other places. They were or serving the French king as there was a soldier business. A soldier, or to the Vatican, yes, to the Holy See, of course, and then some went to Brazil, to Canada, to the United States, and everything. So it was not necessarily a rich country, then you have different factors that probably help Switzerland then to go to prosperity, and one of them being actually the lack of natural resources, I would say, because of the lack of natural resources, then you had to find other ways to make money. And what were the other ways to make money when you are at the crossroads of trade routes is basically to try to add value to the products that are traded, and to add value with after the Industrial Revolution, of course, with industry when it is be it with textile or other or machinery, and to try to make products that are really then going to increase the value of your economy. Another factor is that we have been also actually receiving a lot of people from other countries who came with very good ideas and who were actually also sometimes fleeing other countries, like the French Huguenots at some point of time when they came to Switzerland, because the King of France didn't want the Protestant anymore for some time, and they came to Switzerland, and many of them were involved in the watch industry,
yes.
And so the Huguenots were the big founders of the Swiss watch industry in Switzerland. And then we had, during the 19th century, as Switzerland was declared neutral, and when it became in 1848 actually really one of the first modern states, when you had those still monarchies all around us, you had quite a lot of people coming from Italy, from Germany, who were probably too politically involved, too liberal for their governments at that time, and who developed great industries like Nestle was developed by a German, and so all these factors helped us to go forward. But then, of course, you had hard-working individuals. You have a good education system. We might talk about it later on, and this has, of course, helped a lot as well. So I would say, a lot of luck because of the situation. Some also this willingness to always do a little better, to always progress when you make a product, to always add value to a product. And in the end, trying to have a system where everybody can benefit from the economy.
So this brings us to the most important. So it's the human beings behind this success. It was not a single machine or a single policy making or something. It is definitely the human beings' hard work. And to have human beings' hard work, it's not only motivation, but definitely there has to be education. So the education system, how was it able to produce such competitive people to the market who are willing to work and, as you have just mentioned, to cross the extra mile for perfection?
Yes. No. It's. You have also factors like political stability, which is something that we have mentioned. You have the fact that you have a legal system that is quite stable, and you had this democratic system, this federalist system, which is not too much intervening in the economic sphere, and so leaving also a good framework for the economy to develop. And then but then you have priorities, and clearly the government of Switzerland, they have always invested a lot of money in the education, a lot of money in innovation, a lot of money in research, and even the private sector itself has invested a lot of money in innovation and research. But the interesting thing about the education system in Switzerland is that first it is a public system, and the private schools are existing, but they have not really challenged the public system, which is functioning and which is with very high quality standards.
Swiss people are usually proud if they are graduate of the public system.
Yeah, exactly. And the other element is what we call dual education. And this is a very important element in Switzerland, also in Germany, I think, where you try to match the needs of the market with what the students are going to learn at school. So that means in Switzerland you have maybe a percentage of only 20% of the people going to university.
This is what I always find hard to
and while you have the rest of the people, when they are 16 years old, they will just go to what we call apprenticeship in a company. We have a very, very big network of small and medium enterprises that will accept these people to do their apprenticeship. They don't pay them much. They pay a little money so that they can just rent a room and of course eat and pay transportation for the basic needs. And at the same time, there is a system of schools, again, public schools, that are, where the apprentice go for 1 day or two days a week and continue to learn while they are also working at the same time. And this system is working extremely well because it is really matching with the needs of the market.
Though I find that very interesting because I remember when I was in 1989 in a scholarship, I discovered this system that not everybody is going to the university, although the universities are for free. So 20% only of the students get enrolled, the ones who are only fit for the tough education in the universities, because nobody said that Zurich University is an easy university to graduate from, or Geneva or whatever. So people would choose to take a technical school to learn a basic, or to learn a special trait or a special profession, whether this is as a mechanic or a worker or an advanced worker in a certain regime. And in the end, after you have just given a mention, after that they will have a chance to have a good paying job, right? That they can have a good life with no need to...
we need technicians,
yes.
And the technicians are very well paid in Switzerland, sometimes even more than the social scientists.
Than the white... so this is the white collar thing. I mean, so you're able to combat the white collar idea, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. And it is... And you are... in my family, my sister, she did first an apprenticeship, as she was 16 years old, in agriculture. And after that, she went to university to be an engineer, also in agricultural engineering. And then, of course, did other things. So, but that was this experience that she had in concrete, in the concrete work in the agriculture was of big help for. And the same now with for example, my nephew, who is exactly in the same situation. He did an apprenticeship in mechanics, and then now he's doing mechanical engineer. He's becoming a mechanical engineer and working then in. So you always have all these bridges, the possibility of this bridge between what you do with learning the work and the continuous education that you can follow. And, and nobody is ashamed of that, of course. On the contrary, the people are very proud of the technical skills they have acquired. They get, the social status is the same. And of course, in Switzerland, you have also several safety nets, I would say, when it comes to social security, when you come to health insurance. So that means that, there is the framework for all the people who are, hard workers and who are doing their profession to be, to feel that they are just developing themselves like any other one.
I was discussing with you before we went on air the two great societies that are working. The society, for example, for paraplegics, where almost all the Swiss are members of this society, and of course a lot of workers. But after the break, I think we'll discuss more about this.
Yes, back again, word of info, and you can call us at 2578-9407. We now have to transfer to the opening of the 77th round in the United Nations to transfer the speech of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. So back again, word of info, and we're back with His Excellency Ambassador Paul Garnier, Ambassador of Switzerland in Egypt, Dr. Amrou Mabrouk, Professor of Plastic Surgery at Ain Shams University.
So we're just before listening to our President Sisi, we were talking about the secret of the success of the economy of Switzerland, and you were very kind to elaborate on the human beings, the policy makers, the political situation, and of course the geography. All of these factors helped very much Switzerland to be a success in economy. And Egypt with Switzerland and Switzerland have a great fruitful relation that has been going on for many years. And of course the cooperation between Swiss government and the Swiss people and Egypt is something that has to be emphasized, especially with the President Fattah Sisi meeting His Excellency the President of the Swiss Confederation yesterday. Tell us about this meeting, sir, and the cooperation between Egypt and the Swiss government and Switzerland as a whole.
This is a very long answer that I should give you,
of course,
because we have a long-lasting relationship with Egypt, and we have such a multifaceted relationship with Egypt that I don't think I could summarize that in a few minutes. But we, of course, it was a very good occasion at the General Assembly for our President Alain Berset, who is actually coming from the same hometown like mine in
really?
Switzerland, who to meet President Sisi, and I think it was a very productive meeting. They indeed talked about the economy and the good investment climate that there is in Egypt. They also talked about the prospects for more tourism coming also from Switzerland. We also presented what is our cooperation program here in Egypt, which has three important pillars. One is on human rights and democratic processes. The other one is about economic development, and the third one being on protection and migration. And I think talking about migration, I think the both presidents also agreed to cooperate very much on this issue of migration. So once again, it was a very productive meeting. When it comes to the relationship between Switzerland and Egypt in the economic sector, it's I mean, definitely our main export market in Africa. It's one of our biggest trading partners here in the region, and it is a place where you have many companies, many Swiss companies that are settled, that are producing, that have production centers, that are employing many people, and that have been here since actually a long time.
Mm-hmm. And of course, you mentioned the cooperation in tourist business and tourist industry, because I know that there is a great secret of success of the industry of the Swiss tourist industry. I mean, what was the secret of success of the Swiss tourist industry? And of course, we will talk about the Egyptian-Swiss cooperation in this field. I know in just a minute or two, sir.
The secret is that we have a very beautiful landscape, very beautiful mountains.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, we'll be back for another external transmission. So, back in.
So we are talking about the Egyptian-Swiss cooperation in the field of tourism. Do we have some ventures in between the Swiss and Egyptian companies in the field of tourism, sir?
Well, you have a lot of presence of Swiss in Egypt running, and some big hotels, for example, on the Red Sea coast. You have you have the Mabrouk chain. That was something that was initially Swiss-centered, that now has evolved to a more multi-stakeholder company. What the good news that we have is that Swiss is going to open a new flight between Geneva and Hurghada in October. This is good news, and other companies are also considering opening more flights into the Red Sea area. The numbers of tourists coming to Egypt is increasing again. We know that on the other side we have always a lot of visitors from Egypt going to Switzerland. They are incredibly complementary, those two countries. When I think one Egyptian wrote a book about the Alps and the pyramids, and I think there is an attractiveness of Egypt for the Swiss, as well as the Egyptians like to go to Switzerland and to enjoy the mountains and the quiet lakes and cities of Switzerland.
Yes. And one remaining point, of course, is the cultural cooperation. I know that there is a Swiss culture center in Egypt that has been working for quite a long time. And could you please tell us about this field of cooperation, which I believe is doing a lot on the level of one-to-one between Egyptians and Swiss?
Yeah, the cultural relationship between Egypt and Switzerland is also a very long-lasting one. Not only because we had quite a lot of Swiss who were developing economic activities already in the 19th and 20th century, but we have an antenna of our cultural cooperation from the so-called Swiss Arts Council called Pro Helvetia. That has been established since 30 years here in Egypt, and that is developing more and more programs between Swiss and Egyptian. And this is very interesting because I think what is very important for Pro Helvetia is that you have this exchange between Egyptian and Swiss artists. And one of the programs is called Artists in Residence, where you can stay for some time in Switzerland for an Egyptian artist and vice versa. Swiss artists come here. We had a big event for the celebration of the 30 years of Pro Helvetia a few weeks ago with a very well-known troupe called Movement Chance, a mask troupe, and this was a big event. We will have until the end of the year still big events coming up. One being the participation of Switzerland to the Panorama Film Festival with two films, and then we will have 2 conferences during the Italian week in Cairo, and we are also celebrating with the 70th anniversary of the Human Rights Declaration with some movies discussing gender issues and migration. We on top of that we will have also a group of musicians that is coming next week, and that is called Kaleidoscope, that will make some concerts in Cairo.
So this is going to be pop music, or?
No, it's a modern jazz music. Yeah, modern jazz music. And once again, you have many events developing, and this is a very intense cooperation between the Egyptian and the Swiss cultural scene.
So this is really very kind of you to come and to give us all this information about Switzerland and Egypt. And definitely we've enjoyed your company, and you promised us to come again, please, to give us more about Switzerland.
Of course, dear Amr, it was really nice having me here, and a pleasure talking to you. And as I was telling you, the relationship between Egypt and Switzerland is so intense that I think, yes, one interview is not enough.
Of course.
And by this we come to the end of Word of Info. We had today the pleasure of the company of His Excellency Mr. Paul Garnier, Ambassador of Switzerland to Egypt, Dr. Amrou Mabrouk, Professor of Plastic Surgery at Ain Shams University. Dua Muhammad was at the controls. I'm Najla Naguib. See you next Thursday, same time, same station, FM 95.4.